I just want to welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming and participating in this this evening. As I mentioned, I've kind of let you guys know about some of the technical stuff that you can do, and I'll let you know when I start to share the screen with you. Hello. Got a couple more people coming on. And so we're really happy that you could join us and so that we can share this experience that we had launching the yoga project. This presentation will be around 30 minutes and then we'll have a Q&A afterwards. And my name is Erin Moon, and the other person, she's going to talk in a second, you're going to be able to see her, is Barrie Risman.
Hello.
That's Barrie. She's in Montreal and I'm in Vancouver. And we are going to get this going. So I'm going to share my screen with you guys. And I'm going to put this in slideshow. And now, if you're having any problems seeing these slides, you can go to full screen, which is in your upper right-hand corner, and you can go into the little box where you see maybe either Barrie or myself, and there is a line, and that line will indicate that you won't be able to see anyone, so you'll just see the slides and you'll hear Barrie and I. Or you can go over one to the little square, kind of the half square, and that's for seeing the current speaker. All right, so we're gonna get started. Oops.
Okay, so I also want to say welcome again, and we're just so happy to be able to share this amazing project with you all tonight. So the World Spine Care Yoga Project exists under the larger umbrella of the World Spine Care Organization, whose mission is here to improve lives in underserved communities through sustainable, integrated, and evidence-based spine care. And to fulfill this mission, World Spine Care has established spinal care clinics in Botswana, Dominican Republic, Ghana, and next month they're opening another clinic in India. And they work in each of these areas, they work in conjunction with the local healthcare system, and clinics are staffed by volunteer spine care clinicians, chiropractors, physios, and other professionals that stay for both short and long-term times, as well as local administrators in each of the clinics. And in these clinics, they provide free interdisciplinary spinal care to patients in the local community.
The Yoga Project mission is to support the global mission of World Spine Care by empowering individuals in underserved populations to share the practices of yoga. And our vision is that everyone, everywhere has access to the practices of yoga as a tool for active self-care. So World Spine Care has created the Yoga Project to use yoga as another means of addressing the crippling impact of spinal disorders in underserved regions around the world, and specifically as an active as opposed to passive care model. So it's part of the larger mission. Passive care is someone who is working on your body, so someone like a chiropractor or a massage therapist or an acupuncturist, where your body is passive at the time that they're doing treatment. And then active is where you are actively moving your body, so physiotherapy exercises, yoga, the Straighten Up program, which is endorsed by the World Health Organization. And yoga is a great tool for active self-care. The World Spine Care Yoga Project exists as part, as I mentioned, of the larger World Spine Care mandate, part of which addresses the prevention and rehabilitation of spinal conditions. But our funding itself is actually separate from World Spine Care, which means that a financial donation, any financial donations offered or created, go directly 100% into the Yoga Project if specified. So otherwise it gets dumped into the larger World Spine Care mandate, or it can get specified into the Yoga Project mandate for this project.
So the Yoga Project started taking shape about 2 years ago, and it was really the initiative of Jeff Outerbridge, who's the World Spine Care Clinical Director. He had the idea to incorporate yoga as a form of active self-care for the World Spine Care Clinic patients, because he saw, as a doctor and also as a practitioner of yoga himself, as well as by looking at all the additional benefits in the mindfulness and breath exercises, that there's really mounting evidence for yoga's effectiveness for treating spinal pain over other forms of exercise. So Jeff recruited Erin and I to head and create the program. And both of us have backgrounds teaching yoga teachers, training yoga teachers, and also we've worked for many years therapeutically with yoga students and training yoga teachers in therapeutic yoga. And Erin had also been to South America and Kenya participating in different international volunteer projects. And so all this together, we felt we could really create a program that was not only effective, but also culturally sensitive.
And our intention was to create a unique teacher training geared toward training interested participants in communities with established World Spine Care clinics. So clinics that had been in use and in the community for about a year, ideally, is what we're thinking. We wanted to create a program that was in line with World Spine Care's mission, and yoga, means that the Yoga Project needed to be sustainable. It had to have an exit strategy, and it needed to build local capacity. And that's the idea about when you build local capacity, that is actually what you create. You create an exit strategy, and you create the possibility for them to stand on their own. We were clear from the beginning that we would be training local people to offer classes for patients of the World Spine Care clinics as part of the active preventative care treatment. And we would be coming in after the clinic is established and beginning the clinics in Botswana, because this was the oldest and most well-established clinic that was available at the time.
And we knew from the beginning that our goal would be that the teachers we trained would offer weekly classes in yoga, breath awareness, and mindfulness that would provide tools for the patients for not only increased mobility, but also stress reduction and the psychosocial support that's so helpful in managing back pain when it reoccurs, to lessen its intensity, duration, and frequency. And we also knew right from the beginning, while we didn't know what exactly the training would be like, we knew for sure that it was going to be a different type of training from any kind of Western model that we had done or participated in before.
Yeah, that's for sure. Oops, sorry. Oh, come on, go back. There we go. So to create this teacher training, we pulled from our personal experience. We pulled from all of the research that was coming up, looking really specifically at what was different and what was being used, because always with World Spine Care, you're looking at evidence-based things. So we were really trying to keep with that mandate, which was exciting for both of us, I think, as well, and a fun challenge. And so we created the program that had breath, posture, and mindfulness exercises that included 45-minute class sequences that our teachers would teach, which is this next slide, if it's going to come up. Come up. There we go.
So in terms of the teacher training content, we wanted to make sure we had enough content for this first training. So we created 8 sequences in escalating in mobility. So the first sequence that you're looking at now, it was our most basic sequence. That was all chair work. And moving sequentially, getting a little bit more difficult till the 8th sequence was almost all standing. And we were addressing a patient population that couldn't get up or down from the floor without pain. So this is who we were teaching training the teachers to teach, people who couldn't get up and down off the floor without pain. So all classes, as you can see here, this is a kind of a typical sequence. Every class sequence we designed began with a mindfulness practice and a couple of breathing practices. And we created a menu of mindfulness and breath exercises so that the teachers could choose and create some variety. And then we went into the modified yoga postures that really emphasized getting all the major parts of the body moving, and also emphasized functional movement. So for this population, every sequence included how to get up and down off the chair mindfully. So you can see this is an example of the progression of the sequence, where we started basic heel toe lifts, got up to opening the hips and moving the spine and twisting the spine, and then moving into the upper body work, and then again closing with breath exercise and mindfulness.
Okay, good. There we go. Oh, I keep showing you the next slide. So before we got to go to this incredible place of the world, we needed to fundraise. And that came in many different forms. As I mentioned before, World Spine Care's mandate is huge and goes way beyond just building clinics around the world. It goes into research and just a plethora of other things. We needed to fundraise to get Barrie and I there. We also needed to fundraise so that we could provide transportation costs or cover transportation costs for our students, to feed our students. We gave them lunch every day to make sure that we had the manual covered and all of the many expenses that come into this type of project. So we had yoga studios donate karma classes. So every week a studio would donate all of the funds collected from certain classes. We had friends from New York City, Montreal, Ottawa, Vancouver, Denver, and beyond helping and doing singular donation classes. Shri Yoga, the yoga studio that Barrie was a co-owner in, made a cookbook and we also had family and friends donate. Yoga mats came from 4 different studios all across Canada, got packed into bags, and then we were ready to go. So Botswana is a fascinating country, and without going too much into the history, it is a unique African nation because it has never had a bloody war for its borders or within. It's diamond and mineral rich, as well as has an exploding high-end adventure tourism industry. You see on this picture, there's the Central Kalahari Game Reserve, and then the Chobe River just straight up from there is one of the rivers that actually feeds into the Zambezi, which goes over the famous Victoria Falls, which shares 3 borders of Zambia, Zimbabwe, and Namibia. I think mostly in Zambia and Zimbabwe. And then there's also the Okavango Delta, which has amazing game reserves. And then you see way down on the lower right-hand side, that's Shishong and Mahalape. And that's a much more arid area. So this is a woman in our region, so in the Shishong Mahalape area. She's selling watermelons, which were ripe when we were there, and we ate them every single day. And she's also selling in those little buckets back there on the back of that truck, mopani worms. Mopani worms weren't actually in season, but they're dried caterpillars that are eaten locally. They're salty and dry, and they're kind of just quite crunchy. I thought they were quite tasty, but some people disagreed. And some of the locals actually don't even eat them because they're a little grossed out by it, but I thought they were quite tasty, and they're very protein packed. And then, Barrie, I'll hand it over to you.
Mm-hmm. So the flagship World Spine Care Clinic is located in Shishong, Botswana, which is in the central southeast that we saw on the map. And it has low hills around it that are used for grazing cattle, and it's mostly agricultural. So most of the families practice, subsistence farming and maybe small agricultural businesses. And go to the next slide, Erin. This is a family making their morning tea or coffee. And we picked some of these pictures so that you could see the way people use their bodies in the local lifestyle. So you can see this family the family sitting down for their making their tea. You can see the woman's bent over the fire, and the men are squatting. So sometimes they have cars, but mostly many people are using manual labor to get everything. So these two ladies are working out in their fields, and the farms aren't quite big enough. They're really, everything is done manually. They don't have machines to help them. So preparing the land, planting and harvesting. Sometimes the crops are sold at the local market, which is also, you know, the crops are brought to the market by foot often, or by hand.
Yeah. And these are actually two women here coming in. So you can see we're closer to the city now with those big power lines in the distance. They're bringing in sugarcane, which is a lot used all over the place. It's quite lovely. They've got some watermelons, it looks like, too, and they'll bring them into Mahalape. So Mahalape is the other location where World Spine Care is working in Botswana right now. It is a town of about 40,000, and it has a very rural feel, different than Gaborone, which is the capital city and has 230,000 people and is 2 hours away. That's the hub, but Mahalape is more like a rural town. It has that feel. There's a lot more space within the city itself. That being said, there is a lot of Western influence, as well, as you can see here, slowly but surely making its way. And there's more people living a more sedentary lifestyle, and with jobs that are requiring them to be in chairs as opposed to in the fields, which, you know, is not much better for the back either in the end. And this is a woman just outside of Shoshong village, and this is how a lot of things are carried around.
Here's photos of the World Spine Care Clinic. So we can't see the Mahalape clinic right now, but on the bottom, okay, there it comes. So the Mahalape clinic on the top there is located in the Mahalape Hospital, which is outside of the city. And so World Spine Care has 2 or 3 rooms inside the hospital, and they operate out of there 3 times a week. On the bottom, you see the Shoshong Clinic, which is a freestanding porta-cabin that's next to the local medical clinic. So it's all in the same compound. And that clinic is opened 2 days a week. And you can see Raquel, the woman in the pink shirt. She was one of the long-term clinic supervisors, and she's a chiro and a physio from Spain that was there for a year.
So this is a picture from our first day. We had 2 different groups. We had a group from Shoshong and a group from Mahalape. So this is our Shoshong ladies. There's Barrie. They were so happy to get these yoga mats, as you can see. We had 7 women. The average age was around 50. All were or had been patients of the clinic and suffered from some sort of spinal or musculoskeletal pain. So if it wasn't their back, then it was maybe their knees or ankles. And just on a side note, this is actually the leading population statistically for musculoskeletal pain and spinal issues in the world, is women in their 50s, particularly in the developing world. For Shoshong, there was an immediate appreciation of the opportunity of coming into this educative program and this capacity building program. As former and current patients of the clinic, they participating themselves already in the Straighten Up program, which was an exercise active care program that was being offered a few times a week. A couple were already teaching that. And so they were really game. They saw the value of the opportunity, and they loved the idea of helping their communities. Super community-based culture as a whole, but particularly in the villages. And they called themselves the grandmas. They self-proclaimed themselves the grandmas. So we lovingly called them the grandmas as well, because they loved calling themselves that.
And then the other half of our training group were the Mahalape group, which, as you can see, quite different from the Shoshong grandmothers. So this group was, we had 6 young people, 5 young men and 1 woman. And they were all fitness trainers from the local gym. And this man, the man in yellow, the yellow shirt, he was the gym owner, and he had recruited his aerobics teachers and boot camp teachers to take our training. And so this group, you know, they really they appreciated the physical challenge of the yoga practice, and we'll show you a bit more about that in a little bit. But they really had to learn the value of what they were receiving in this particular training, and understand how to teach the World Spine Care patient population. So if you can imagine being a 20-year-old super fit man or woman and being asked to slow down, you know, and just stretch your wrist like that, you know, and also to try to imagine what it would be like to be in a body that has pain just getting up and down off a chair. You can imagine that it was a big learning curve for them. And at the same time, part of our intention in this training was also to really build their capacity. So teach skills that they could use and apply outside of the World Spine Care context, so that they would be teaching classes for the World Spine Care patient community, but that they could also use the skills they were getting in this training outside of that, even at their gym.
So this is us just getting started on that first day. After the first day, we had learned a lot. So first of all, we learned we had these two very, very different groups. And we came back together and we saw that due to transportation, space issues, differences in physical ability, we actually had an English language difference between the two groups. The Mahalape trainers were quite affluent at using English, whereas the Shoshone women were pretty good at understanding, pretty good at speaking in English, but reading English was a little tough. And also these were such new ideas. And so ideally we needed to have a translator for that group. And so we quickly decided to separate the groups, and Barrie would take the Shoshone women the first week. I would take the Malahape trainers, and then we would switch for the second week so that they got access to both of us and got to see and hear things, you know, same things, but said in a different way. It's a really important part of learning as a whole. And then twice a week, because the clinical supervisor was coming to Shoshone, we would actually bring both groups together. We would practice separately for the whole morning, and then in what was for the first week, our afternoon, we would put the groups together.
So a typical training day for both groups began with a morning practice. And the intention of this practice was to give the two groups practices that were appropriate for them as students, to kind of get them involved in the practice of yoga as students. So that looked very different for the two groups. So for the Shoshone ladies, it was really very much the work that they would be doing in the sequences they were teaching. So you can see here they're doing tree pose. Some of them are holding a chair, some of them aren't, but they all have the option to hold the chair. And that was part of their morning practice. And the boys, the Mahalape group, mostly boys. There's the one young woman there in the red shirt, Haurata. You can see this was could be much more vigorous for them, and they really appreciated the challenge of this. So you can see here Erin teaching them, moving them through a vinyasa of sun salutations. Now we have, after the morning practice, we would review the manual exercises and do lots and lots of practice teaching, because obviously we're teaching people not only stretches and exercises that are new to them, but we're also teaching them how to teach these things. And you can see here, this is a good example of the many ways we use the mats. So not just mats to do postures on, but mats to support the back and to give height to the hips for sitting well. So this was the Shoshone ladies in the practice teaching, and now here's the Mahalape group teaching in the hospital. So their training was done in a room in the hospital. And it was also quite different to train them, because they were used to leading groups in movement, teaching kind of a boot camp style fitness. But of course, you know, in teaching yoga, it's so different because we had to teach them also to address not just the physical body, but also the breath and the mindfulness components.
So twice a week, as I mentioned, we would bring them together. And this was one of our biggest wins of the whole program. The ladies thought the young men in the Mahalape group wouldn't understand them, and would we work them way too hard and try to move them quickly because they're all these fitness trainers and mostly these young super fit men, and Harauta was very fit as well. And so they're quite nervous about it. And I think they were also a little bit intimidated by young minds and by city versus country a little bit. And the ladies learned very quickly that they were learning alongside these young men, that they were learning just as much and at just the same speed as this young training group. And the young trainers, they were nervous because they were still kind of figuring out what this whole thing was and how to slow down and what it would be like. And so they learned what it would be like to actually teach the population that they were going to teach. They got to understand how things translate to each other versus how things translate to this population that they would be teaching, this limited mobility population. Harauta, who we've been speaking of in the Mahalape group, was thrilled to be back with the women, and everybody was really interested by the idea of learning the same things but ever so slightly different, that there wasn't really hard rules about how it had to be said, that we were trying to teach them as much as possible to come to it from their own point of view. And seeing that even Barrie and I said things slightly different was really good learning for them, I think.
So some of the successes that we recognized in this first training were first splitting the groups up, as Erin said, it was a necessity, and it worked really well for all the reasons we've mentioned, as well as bringing the two groups together several times. Again, for the reasons Erin mentioned, that all worked really well. Also, a lot of our manual was visual intentionally, and that worked really well because this is a very visual culture. And assessing and teaching the morning practices according to the needs of the two groups was another win. Also, Erin and I spent a lot of time debriefing. So every night after the training day, we would sit down for 1 or 2 hours and really go through the whole day, and knew that we had to capture everything that had happened and the challenges and the successes and how we had dealt with the challenges as part of the developing content of the program. So, and then the other big thing that helped was we realized about halfway through the training that in addition to listing out the sequences, that it would be really helpful for everybody to have a visual representation of the sequences. So we were busy doing that at night and on the weekend, and that did make a huge difference, that they could have that little sheet with them in preparing to teach or in teaching. And so as opposed to the list, having this kind of visual representation of our sequences.
Great. We're just getting a little bit of audio feedback. Can everybody just check their lower left-hand corner and make sure that they are indeed muted just until the presentation's over? We're just getting some audio feedback. Thank you. So some of the challenges that we had, as I mentioned, was actually translation. So in the future, we need to have more of the mindfulness and breath work, because everything else can be visual, but the mindfulness and breath work actually does need to be translated into Setswana, which is the local language. With the structure of our day needed to shift slightly. We needed to do everything in the morning. It's a morning-centered culture. Get it done nice and early. Everybody's up early anyway. It's not equatorial, but it definitely has a nice early rise. And then we could feed everybody kind of after, so we didn't get the post-lunch food coma. Mahalape group, we definitely had some more issues with when it came to timeliness and attendance. And that we learned was cultural. It's just a slower paced culture, certainly from Barrie grew up in New York, and I lived in New York for 13 years, and it's definitely far from that clip. And we knew that going in, but it was even more so we needed to just talk about timeliness and attendance, because that's what we need our teachers to show up and be there for the patients. We also learned that it was also due to the population being a focus and giving back to the community being the focus. And it has been a post-training challenge as well. Transportation has been a bit of an issue for the Mahalapi group because they have to get to the hospital. And just figuring out for us how we can structurally shift some of those things to make it more effective during the program and then after, for serving the best population, both in becoming teachers and for the patients who will be taught. Mm-hmm. We also had an interesting challenge, cultural challenge, of getting our trainees to talk about their experience. So the question of how was that, how are you doing, how are you feeling, is very different when it's a other-oriented culture as opposed to a personal looking introspective culture, which is more of what we have in the West. So that was really fascinating. And so just continuing with those questions and coaxing and helping people to learn how to articulate so that Barrie and I knew how to serve them best, because ideally we need feedback to know how to serve them best. And they did open up, and there was a lot of willingness to weigh in by that second week. And the practices as a whole, getting that feedback was fantastic. Space became an issue. As you can see here, this is from our first day. It became a bigger issue when we put the two groups together, and then we had the mornings separate, so we needed 2 spaces, and then together we needed a larger space. So it actually became a budgetary issue. Both transportation and the space itself became a budgetary issue. In a small village, to try to get 2 spaces, and when you are the outside body, even though there's a clinic there, it's been established within the community for a while. There's also just, if somebody else wants the space, or if somebody uses that space to make money, then we want to contribute to the working businesses that are there. We did with the food, and we need to inevitably with the spaces as well. So it's just an ongoing look at what we need for budget.
So by the end of the 10-day training, we had 6 teachers who were certified and ready to start giving classes. Yay. And we had 7 teachers in training. And since the graduation, all 7 have fulfilled the requirements to actually begin teaching. So everyone in the group that we trained is actually actively teaching. And they are also practicing with each other, practice teaching with each other, going to each other's classes. And the agreement that we came to with both of the groups was that we teach you these skills, and in return, you teach 1 class per month at the World Spine Care clinic sites. And that's what's been happening.
So some of the outcomes in our learning is the number one thing is a community is best served by its own. And we kind of knew that going in, but it was really brought home during this training. We need teachers that are within the patient group. People who are patients that are already attending active self-care, so are already interested in active self-care offered through World Spine Care. And there's many administrative lessons we've learned and cultural lessons, most of which we've already mentioned. And all of it will greatly help us when we roll out level 2 this spring and for our other clients in the future.
And of course, the personal benefit that Erin and I gained was huge, both not just personally, but also professionally. Therapeutic yoga is so much about thinking outside the box that you've been given as a yoga teacher. And it's really about bringing the practice to the practitioner versus fitting the practitioner into the practice. And this was true in this training, both physically as well as culturally. So, for example, when we taught them the different mindfulness techniques, we know that there's a physiological difference that happens in the brain from research. But we didn't go deeper into that because it's not really important for them at this stage. It was really just about giving them the tools and also being sensitive to the cultural context. So we taught the yoga as a completely secular form of exercise, and really wanted to respect the religious and spiritual context that we were entering into. And I think the other big benefit we gained was the knowledge and really the experience that these practices work, and that this program works. And we're definitely answering a need that has come from within the community and offering them tools that can be used by the community itself to serve themselves and to help themselves.
And so today our communities are serving, so as Barrie mentioned, twice a week. So the efficacy of the program continues. In Shoshone, there's about 20 people who show up. We actually just got a note from the clinical supervisor who's there now, or the two, Eileen and Nadine, and they said, we need more chairs. We're running out of chairs. So that's always a really nice thing to hear. Mahalape, we're working with a bit, but part of what we want to do with Mahalape when we go back is actually do a level 1 again, but use people who are coming to the classes. So people, again, who best served by patient body is best served by its own. So having that group actually learn how to do it so they can teach themselves and potentially more people. And then for level 2, going back and supporting our teachers that are already there. So giving them more, starting to work on how to get up and down off the floor mindfully and carefully, and with an awareness of how to do that and not create more potential pain. And so that's what the hope is now. And I'm going to kind of put it out there for you, just first of all to say thank you so very much for coming. And we're going to go into a Q&A period now. As much as you want to see, you can go into gallery view or otherwise, and you can either wave at me and I'll unmute you, or you can unmute yourself and start to ask a question, or you can put it in the chat box. Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, we're very sad. Or you can type your question here.
We can see you too.
Yeah. So whatever, if you give me a wave, then I can answer questions, or you can type them into the chat box. Oh, we got my parents are waving. What you got, Mom and Dad?
All right, I have a question. I know you did mention it, but I'm curious, and in fact, I mentioned you going there to some other people we knew, and they asked me the question. They said, why Botswana, of all places? Why Botswana? What was specific that made it Botswana?
It's a great question. So there's a couple of things that come into that, and one of them is the stability of the region allows the possibility of the government. Ideally, everything that World Spine Care does is an exit strategy. So if they're being asked from within the culture, either from the medical field within the country itself, or a community, or a specific doctor even sometimes, or sometimes the government's health organization has learned about World Spine Care and says, well, can you come in and create the structure that then we can exist within? And so that's what happened with Botswana. They were essentially, they learned about, and there was a connection there. And then slowly the rollout of that first clinic started to happen. And it needs to be, it needs to be stable enough that ideally World Spine Care will be able to step back. And there's actually an exit strategy for the 2 to 3 year mark with the clinic that's in Botswana right now. And Nathan, if you've got anything to say in this too, definitely feel free to pipe in and unmute yourself.
Yeah, I'll just add, and I do have a question, but just adding on to what you said, Scott Haldeman is the founder of World Spine Care. and his goal is to work together with the governments. And so there's an agreement, a memorandum of agreement with the government that they will support what World Spine Care does. And in fact, in one of the newer clinics they opened, the government actually provided the facility, and so World Spine Care didn't even have to have the trailers in the buildings that we do in Shishong in Botswana. So that's really great.
Yeah. So it's really neat that it's who's asking, who's heard about, and who then has a structure within that there would be that's stable enough to create capacity within the country, and then to be more of a resource, as opposed to you come in, you staff it. It's all foreign body. It's looking to build capacity within the country itself, and that impetus comes from the country itself.
Can I ask a question? When we talk about teaching yoga and other movement practices, personal trainers use different cues. And I know World Spine Care has published a paper on the language barriers and having to use different phrases to describe pain that patients feel, such as sciatica. In Botswana, they'll refer to it as ants crawling up the leg. Were there any different cues you had to learn? Any fun phrases that you got to learn from the people in Botswana?
Yeah. So, well, yeah, that was a huge learning, actually, in many different ways. That's a great question. And the first thing we learned was how to say breathe in and breathe out. We learned that on the first day. Hemelamote, hemelakote. And there's actually a little video of us learning that. And we thought that's the perfect thing for a yoga teacher to learn. And, we learned a lot of that from them. I mean, and a lot of it was asking them to describe their experience, for example, of a breathing exercise or a mindfulness practice. And that was actually one of the challenges, because I think this is a culture that is not so used to describing or reflecting on an inner experience, unlike Western teacher trainers, where, there's a lot of that unpacking and talking about and reflecting and processing that goes on. But it was very interesting. Like, we would ask them, how did you feel after the mindfulness exercise? And they would say, oh, I feel very calm, like the ocean, or like the sky. They would use a lot of like natural imagery from their culture also. So yeah, for sure. We learned a lot of that, not so much physically, because we weren't, the postural instructions were we weren't asking them to reflect on how they felt. It was like, move your arm, it was very kind of direct, but it was more, I would say, in the mindfulness and the breathing that we got into a little bit more of the imagery and the kind of cultural differences in how we would speak about that.
Yeah, and we were really lucky. We got to actually meet the woman who wrote that paper and who did that huge amount of research at a medical conference that we spoke at in Gaborone when we first got there, that World Spine Care hosted, where we introduced the yoga project to 150 occupational therapists, physiotherapists, surgeons, medical students, chiropractic students from all over South Africa, Zambia, Botswana, and otherwise, which is one of the most exciting things I've definitely done and might ever do in my career, was getting up there and being able to present. And it was wonderful to talk to her, because we had a little bit of an idea heading in that we might have some of that. And my favorite one was one of the first times that I did the mindfulness with the group. One of the groups, I said, how do you feel? And they said, oh, so sleepy. I'm going to go to bed right now. And I remembered what she said about how to kind of elicit what you're thinking that they mean, as opposed to the word that they're choosing. And I said, is it like you're going to go and crawl up in your bed right now and go to sleep? Or is it that you feel very quiet, or that you feel very, very calm? And that was the response. They actually said, oh yeah, it's that one. I don't want to go to bed because it's the middle of the morning. It was that they needed just different verbiage to articulate that. And it was really, and then of course that all of the nature was just, they sink especially our Shoshone women, and actually the Mahalape trainers too, sunk right into the mindfulness practice. Just immediately, boom, you could feel it hit the room. That level of calm and quiet that is not as far away from their world as it is, I think, from ours, quite honestly, just living in a rural setting alone. Yeah. Any other questions? No? No typing questions? Oh, okay. Oh, there you go. Go for it. Yep. You are unmuted, Marge.
Oh, yes. I just have a comment, and that is, it's an absolutely fascinating presentation, and I like the pace of the presentation.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks, Mom.
Barrie and Erin and all of the others. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I was curious, looking at it, you mentioned that the people you were teaching were actually, like, for lack of a better term, patients themselves getting treatment for spine issues. And I'm curious about the percentage of spine problems between lumbar and cervical. The reason I ask the question is because they carry so much on their heads.
Yes.
And I would think that cervical would be a lot. Obviously, they do a lot bending over too. So I'm just curious about the percentage.
To the best of my knowledge, and Nathan, you might be able to talk about this more, I believe that it's always chronic low back pain first, cervical spine pain second. And that's, I think, statistically a kind of across the board, just because of the lack of range. It's interesting. It's because of the lack of range of motion that's innate in the anatomy of the low back, and the cervical spine issues are because of the amount of range of motion that are in the cervical spine. But I'm not sure how this culture differentiates from cultures who don't carry things on their heads. My assumption is, yes, it goes up, but that's just an absolute assumption. Yeah. Good. All right. Any last questions?
Well, before we go, can we let people know how they can help or get involved?
Yes. Barrie, do you want to?
Yes, sure. So the biggest way that people can help is fundraising, really, because as Erin said, we exist from a financial perspective. We are completely independent of World Spine Care. So in order for this program to continue, we have to keep doing our own fundraising. So any kind of support in terms of yoga teachers can teach yoga classes and donate the proceeds. Any kind of fundraiser help, or even if somebody has time to help with outreach for fundraising, that's another big need that Erin and I have, because we're actually right now we're busy creating the content for the level 2 training that we're hopefully going to give in the spring in Botswana. So we definitely need help in organizing, getting the word out to people and organizing the fundraising. And Erin has put up on the screen here that are 2 emails. You can email either one of us, and we can give you even more specific ways to help with that. Do you want to add anything, Erin?
No, that's, I 1000% agree.
Great.
Yeah.
And we also can reiterate that anything you donate to us, it goes 100% to just getting us there and printing out the manuals and getting translators. It all goes just to the World Spine Care Yoga Project, 100%.
Yeah, so Barrie and I don't make any money on this, and the anything that we don't use, say we got the huge influx of fundraising, yay! Any of the money that we don't use will go to some administrative costs. The only administrative costs are for Jeff, and that would be just a little bit going toward, and not into his pocket directly, but into World Spine Care, because they're our support system. So without World Spine Care, we don't exist. We are part of the large mandate of World Spine Care in preventative and in rehabilitative, on the rehabilitative end. And so we use the one employee for everything. He is our go-to doctor because we don't do anything without going to our doctor first. He actually built the clinic in Botswana, and so he is also our cultural liaison. So we use him a lot, and the larger umbrella of World Spine Care and the research that's coming out and everything. So if there's a huge influx of money, again, we're not getting that money. It's going into the World Spine Care mandate. But when you donate, or if you put together something and then you donate as a group, you just need to indicate Yoga Project. Otherwise, it goes into the big pool. If you want to be specific, if you want it to go into the big pool, then just donate to World Spine Care. But if you want it to go to our program, you need to actually specify Yoga Project. And
the other thing it would go toward is also props. I didn't mention that. We've had a lot of donated props. We also need donations of more props always. But, you know, for example, the additional chairs, it would go towards something like that.
Yeah. And keeping the transportation going in Mahalape as well.
And World Spine Care's webpage has a donate page, so worldspinecare.org/donate. So if you go there and you choose your country that you're giving from, just put it in the comments, just say Yoga Project, and that's enough for it to go to you?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's exactly it. Yeah, on the US site, you have to put it in the notes. In the Canadian site, it's actually a drop-down option. But I say always put it in the notes, just because you know that it's going to get there then. Yeah.
Okay. Great. Thank you very much.
Great.
Thank you so very much, everyone, for coming and participating. This video will be available. We'll try to make a link on our website, on our Yoga Project site, and I'll also put it in the event as well, a link. I'll figure out how to do that. Thank you.
Book event. Yeah.
Thank you.
We think alike. And I was just going to say something else. Oh yeah, if you have any questions that come up after this, feel free to email us. As you can see, we love talking about this project, so we're happy to talk to you more about it by email. We can set up a time to talk. So thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you.